Welcome outside the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. I'm Missy Matthews with Mike Pursuta. The voluntary portion of the offseason, 10 OTAs are in the books. Mandatory minicamp starts next week, but the last week of OTAs, we did hear from Minkah Fitzpatrick for the first time, and he did have a lot of stuff to say, Mike.
Some really interesting stuff to say, Missy, and I'm not sure what I found more intriguing. Minkah's assessment that the transitioning secondary, there's some young guys here via the draft. There are some experienced players here via free agency. According to Minkah's schedule, at least, they're ahead of schedule in transitioning. He made it pretty clear. He went over this a couple of times, where he thought they'd be now versus where they are, ahead of the curve. And then the other thing that really got my attention, we're talking about a multi-time All-Pro here, and Minkah Fitzpatrick said he's definitely trying to step up, as he put it, his IQ game. He wants to make plays based on his IQ. He wants to confuse quarterbacks even more. And he's talked to, what did he mention, every defensive coach on the staff, watching film, seeking their input. A guy who's far from resting on his laurels. He's pretty good now. He's trying to get better.
A football junkie, as Coach Tomlin likes to call himself, but I think Minkah fits in that category. But also going back to what you said about being ahead of schedule, that's the same thing we heard week one from Kenny Pickett in terms of the offense installing things. So for me, hearing from both the offense and defensive side that they feel like they're, a little ahead of where they thought they would be, especially heading into mandatory minicamp, 3 more practices, then you head to Latrobe, and that's where things are really going to get started.
Yeah, Pickett made his announcement on day one, I believe. And I talked to Zach Gentry a few days later about that, and Gentry's opinion was this is a reflection of all the work the players did to be ready for more. And the coaches have recognized that individually and collectively, these guys are up to speed enough that they can give them stuff a lot faster, and if the coaches didn't trust them, they'd slow the pace of the learning down. So that's a pretty good sign. What Minkah had to say is a pretty good sign. You start getting fired up when you hear stuff like this, right? And then you go talk to Cam Hayward, and the wet blanket comes out, and well, I'm kidding about the wet blanket, but Cam Hayward emphasizing for about, I think, the 3rd time in these 3 weeks that, hey, this guy might look good, that aspect of the operation might look good, but you don't really know.
It's June.
Until the pads come on at St. Vincent College. Then you can begin to truly assess and get a more realistic read. So I think you have a good mix of vibes here, if I can go there, if you will, even if you won't.
You did.
There's a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of energy, but there's veteran perspective from Cam Hayward kind of tapping those brakes, saying, as you mentioned, it is just June.
And as we said, they're voluntary, but Minkah Fitzpatrick also talked in terms of the defense, getting on the group text messages saying, here's the date we want everybody there by, just so that we can get the process started, and especially communication. You mentioned the young guys on defense, the veteran free agents who came in. There's a lot of guys that left, especially in the secondary, so it is important to start that as well. But another thing that we have a lot of during these OTAs are nicknames. And
yes, we do.
There's been quite a few that we've enjoyed.
A couple in particular. Larry Ogunjobi referenced Keanu Benton, the 2nd-round nose tackle from Wisconsin. He said he's like a dancing bear.
Like Yogi Bear, up on the tiptoes.
Yogi didn't really dance, did he?
No, but
stole the picnic baskets.
Okay. We have to be fast to do that.
Well, that's an old school reference. Benton went more with, he said he's heard, not maybe Dancing Bear, but the character from Kung Fu Panda.
Okay.
I'm not really up to speed on that.
Nope, me neither.
But Benton took it as a compliment, big and athletic.
Sure.
Nimble, as you said. And my favorite one of the spring, from Mike Tomlin via Patrick Peterson, cornerbacks Joey Porter Jr. and Corey Trice Jr., who are both in the neighborhood of 6'2", in the neighborhood of 200 pounds. Tomlin is calling them the avatar cornerbacks. I asked Corey Trice, about that, and he said, I really don't know what avatar is, but sure, whatever, if that's what they want to call me. I started thinking about that, Missy. Those avatars, they're blue, right? They're really thin, they're really long. Can you imagine the coverage radius on a deep ball if you're trying to drop it over an avatar? I don't think it can be done.
Yeah, it's definitely a compliment for sure.
Particularly if they're riding those things with the wings. They're not going to get beat on a double move on those things.
You can tell it's day 10 of OTAs here as we're wrapping this up.
Trying to emphasize that.
But another person who we heard from this week was DeMarvin Leal, who's entering his 2nd year and who played a lot more probably than he thought or anybody thought last year.
And in a lot more different places.
Sure.
It was interesting to me. I kind of forgot how many different spots he lined up in, and I asked him about that the other day. He said, I lost track. But he was a real interesting guy last year. I think there's a Keanu Benton comparison this year to Leal last year in that when you get a Kenny Pickett and you get a George Pickens, that's where the focus is going to be in the draft class, right? But Leal was a fascinating guy. His Texas A&M tape, he played interior D-line and also rushed off the edge. Carl Dunbar called him a tweener when he got here. He said we could use him at a couple different spots. And I asked Leal if his rookie season with the Steelers was comparable, and he said, oh, no. I did way more stuff here. He even mentioned dropping into coverage, which he didn't do at Texas A&M, and playing middle linebacker, which he didn't do at Texas A&M. So Leal got a crash course in the NFL, in Steelers defense, in playing multiple roles. He thinks he's ahead of the curve because of that. I would tend to agree with him. I think he had an understated, good, solid season last year, making contributions, particularly in the wake of the T.J. Watt injury and some of the adversity they faced. People were unavailable. He was asked to do a lot of things out of necessity, and he did them pretty well. So Benton's, I think, a guy that nobody's really talking about this year, at least not as much as we're talking about Broderick Jones and Joey Porter
The
Jr.
avatars.
But I think you're going to hear a lot of Keanu Benton this coming season. He's going to be a contributor.
Being versatile is never a bad thing, but so...
Don't doubt the dancing bear, Missy, is what I'm trying to tell you.
All right. OTAs are done. Next week, mandatory minicamp, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then what comes next?
Training camp.
There you go. And you can head to Steelers.com to find all of the information, because I know how, this schedule comes out and people are very excited. But July 26th, will be report day for the Steelers, for the players, and then the practices start.
And I think in honor of that, when we do a pre-training camp show, we should get one of those little buckets that they turn upside down in the circus, and the big bear gets on it and kind of
a dancing bear
spins around.
So thanks for joining me here.
All right, glad we're on the same page.
Mandatory minicamp is coming up, and head to Steelers.com for all of your training camp information. We'll see you guys back here next week.